Welcome back to CEEN Caribbean News. It's now time to go in depth. Former news anchor Vesterly Flanagan on Wednesday carried out the final stages of an elaborate plan on two of his former colleagues. He shot dead 24-year-old Alison Parker and 27-year-old Adam Ward on live television around 6:45 a.m. It's the kind of event that the world has come to expect from extremist groups in the Middle East. But this gruesome act came from a man who was employed 2 years ago to the company at which his victims worked. What seemed to be an act of revenge on his former employer was later revealed to be a bit more personal. According to posts from Flanagan's Twitter feed moments after the incident unfolded, he was disgruntled that Adam brought him to the Human Resources Department after working with him on only one occasion. After that incident, Alison was hired. Among the excuses given for his actions, Flanagan says he felt discriminated against. Should this incident motivate worry about the people we share professional space with on a daily basis? To answer that question, we went to see a psychiatrist. It was the ultimate grudge plan that may have taken up to 2 years to put together. The world was shocked on Wednesday when a young journalist, Alison Parker, and her cameraman, Adam Ward, employed to the WDBJ TV station in Virginia, were gunned down on live television by a former co-worker. The suspect in the shooting, Vesterly Flanagan, also known as Bryce Williams, later turned the gun on himself after publicizing to the world that he carried out the act. Flanagan uploaded a video of him shooting his former co-workers to social media, which was followed by a barrage of tweets. Flanagan was fired from WDBJ 2 years ago for disruptive behavior and filed a suit against the company, a lawsuit that he lost a few months ago. He has since been described by former colleagues as being difficult and hard to work with. The issue of challenging co-workers extends far beyond the field of media, making it more than a fear for the safety of journalists, but for the safety of everyone from the mental state of their co-workers. There is always at least one person in any organization that a majority of staff may deem difficult to work with or who may be considered different. Should we be afraid? That question was posed to senior lecturer in the Department of Community Health and Psychiatry at the University of the West Indies, Mona, Dr. Roger Gibson.
I don't think we should be overly concerned. As you said, this is a common situation where you have a difficult individual in an organization. But how often do you get this kind of event playing out? So I think that this is an extraordinary event, that there must be circumstances that are particular to that situation, and that we shouldn't panic and think that everybody who with whom we have some difficulty is now a potential murderer.
While Dr. Gibson says there's no need to suspect the people we work with, he notes that maybe greater attention needs to be paid to the mental state of others. But how do we address circumstances with a challenging co-worker? Do we tolerate their being difficult, or do we try to uncover what makes them perceive that way?
Being more tolerant carries a risk. In other words, that whatever the underlying problem is does not become addressed. So it would be a good idea to try to address the mental health issues that may be at play. But in order to do so, one would have to act in a very tactful kind of way. And I think that perhaps that kind of interaction, that kind of engagement in the issues with mental health should take place at the level of persons who feel comfortable, persons who are competent in dealing with issues of mental health. So I don't think just any co-worker should approach somebody who they think is difficult. At the very least, especially in a larger organization, maybe a human resource person who could perhaps as well identify persons with expertise for dealing with that kind of issue. So I'm saying I think the issue should be addressed, but the person who should address it needs to be selected very carefully.
Is the thought that revenge must be exacted on a company from which one is fired, or against persons believed to be responsible for getting one fired, a foreign thought? Or is the thought more common than we think?
I don't think it's foreign, the idea, the indignation that somebody may feel, the sense of rejection, can easily translate into a desire for revenge. But I think what is foreign is that we don't hear this kind of thing happening so much. So I think the thought may be there, but the action or the carrying through of the idea of a need to exact some amount of revenge, that does not tend to occur.
Now, the United States may not be unfamiliar with public killings when compared with the region where homicides are a mystery, pending investigation in most cases. We asked Dr. Gibson whether the difference in the types of killings are due to stricter gun laws in the Caribbean or more thoughts being employed before acting on rage or grudge.
That's a very difficult question to answer, but I do believe that the liberal gun laws in the United States have a lot to do with this kind of event that we see happening ever so often. So I think that is a factor. But as well, there may be cultural differences where that would make it more unlikely for persons who live in the Caribbean to engage in that kind of activity. So I don't think it's a simple answer. I think maybe it's a multiplicity of issues, and I think that the gun control law is one of those relevant issues.
On the subject of culture, the region, especially Jamaica, has a subculture of retaliation, which Dr. Gibson believes could very well be a deterrent to extreme crimes of the level such as the killing of 2 people on live television. He believes that there is more thought before committing a public crime in the region in fear of loved ones being hurt in return. Hearing of murders in the news is not uncommon. In fact, stories of same can be heard in newscasts globally on a daily basis. But there was widespread shock when news of the murder of the 2 media practitioners broke. Dr. Gibson says it could have been the how it was done versus the act itself which was most shocking.
We see or hear on the news every day of murders taking place. But to have it occur in this manner, which was so dramatic, I think that would have caused the reaction to be much more intense than with any of the other stories of murder that we hear on the news on an ongoing basis.
And a question that begs $1 million answer. What motivates a person to premeditate, then not only kill 2 human beings in cold blood, but publicize the act?
What we have to consider is that perhaps somebody who is doing this has an underlying mental disorder. I'm not sure of the particulars of this case and what the mental health history was of this individual. But, for example, somebody who has a psychotic illness, meaning that he or she has lost some contact with reality, and I'll explain further, in the form of them having, for example, what are called delusional ideas, which are very fixed beliefs that are very firmly held, but are false at the same time. These kinds of delusional ideas can motivate persons to act in extraordinary ways that are sometimes detrimental to others. So for this particular individual who carried out this act yesterday, it is possible that he had unrealistic beliefs and ideas about him being victimized, him being rejected, him being persecuted in some kind of way. And if somebody is having those kinds of beliefs and they hold very strongly to those kinds of beliefs, then it's more likely that they're going to act in a way to retaliate, in a way to exact the kind of revenge that we were speaking about before. On the other hand, if somebody is not having this kind of delusional belief, this very firm idea of them being persecuted and so on, then they get fired from their job. But it's something that they can see from multiple perspectives. They can analyze, they can see what the perspective of the company or the other persons involved, what those perspectives are. And they can come to a more balanced overall picture of what were the circumstances that led them to be fired. And therefore, they will tend not to have that strong desire to have to do something about it. So if there is an underlying mental health issue, especially if the person is psychotic and has these delusional kinds of ideas, then it makes it more likely that this kind of irrational, as I'm sure the behavior is irrational to most of us, this kind of irrational behavior may be more likely in those circumstances.